Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to this virtual book launch, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Josh Wilhelm, and I'm the assistant manager of the Regent College Bookstore here in Vancouver, BC. I'm very pleased to be joined by today's guest, Dr. Matthew J. Thomas. Matthew is a Regent College alum, actually, and he graduated with an MA in Biblical Languages in 2012. And he then went on to complete his doctoral studies at the University of Oxford. And that whole journey is one which very much overlaps with the topic of today's discussion. More on that shortly. Matthew is also a DE instructor here at Regent for theology, I believe. Is that correct, Matt?
That is correct, oddly enough.
Great. And in addition to that, he also serves as assistant professor of biblical studies at the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology in Berkeley, California, which is relatively near where you grew up.
It is, yeah. So we live just down the road from where I grew up, and it's a pretty short commute as well. So wow. we thank God for that.
Nice. So we're all here today to, of course, talk about Matt's new book, which I will lift up and show you all here. This new book was just released on Tuesday, actually, and it's entitled Paul's Works of the Law and the Perspective of Second Century Reception. And it's just been published or republished by IVP Academic. It's a landmark book in Pauline studies, and it's available at the Regent College Bookstore for $48.99. And if you'd like to give us a call or email to order one, we'll gladly ship you a copy. We can ship it for $5 in the US and in Canada. And we also have a very special Regent Bookstore exclusive offer for you. We've sent a stack of signable book plates down to Matt. We'll get him to hold those up and show us.
Signable book plates.
How cool is that? If you're wondering what a book plate is,
this is my Vanna White impression.
Right. Yes. Yep. Book plates are sort of a fancy signable label. And if you purchase a copy of the book from us, Matt is going to sign and handwrite a note for you, and we'll ship that out to you along with the book. It's a little bit of a logistical process in that. Matt's in California. So if you buy a book, we'll let Matt know who you are. He will sign the book plates, send them up to us, and we'll send them out to you with the book. So it's a small way to give you an embodied touch on the books here. We'd love to have you and Matt with us in person at Regent, but we're making the most of the situation we have here.
Just as an addition, if you prefer, any of our kids can go and sign it instead and draw pictures for you. And the pictures can be on request. So if there is a specific picture that you would like, just let us know. Raphael's really into Bowser right now, and so he could try to do a Bowser for you. It's really up to you. So
whether it's a Bowser or Matt's signature, it's a guaranteed value add to this book.
Yeah, I also might just draw a Bowser. Who knows?
Oh, great. With that, let's get into it. I'd actually like to start off with perhaps the most fun question I've got. And Matt, I would say feel free to take as long as you would like to answer this one. But please tell us some more about the really unique and thoroughly Regent-y story of this book and how the seeds were planted and how they grew.
Yeah, awesome. I wanted to start actually by giving a quick shout out to AJ from the well. AJ, stop texting me. It's going to distract this, but here's your shout out. I love you, AJ. You're fantastic and amazing. So there's that. This project. So I've told the story a few times, but the short form is that it really is a CTC2 paper. It's a paper that I wrote in the second semester, being at Regent, and it had its roots in actually going in and doing work in Dr. Packer's class, in his systematic theology class, the semester before. Which is kind of funny because neither of those are actually scripture classes or anything like that. But I'd been doing work in justification with Dr. Packer, and this is just kind of located historically. This is back in I guess started in 2010. So Josh, I don't know if you remember when Tom Wright and John Piper had those books on justification that were going back and forth. So that was kind of the really fresh sort of like stuff that was going around as far as the old perspective on Paul and new perspective on Paul. And so I was trying to wrap my mind around all that and just trying to understand all it. And I'd had a lot that for me, there's a lot of places where the kinds of things that Wright was saying, it made a lot of sense of areas in Paul's theology that I just wasn't, I previously hadn't been able to make a whole lot of sense of. And so I had already become inclined to that position in a lot of ways. And so what I ended up doing is falling from this study on justification to Differ Packer for my CTC paper. I kind of sort of I had Ross Hastings I had as my CTC tutorial and professor there. So I sort of asked him, hey, is it okay if I'm just working in these areas a lot? Is it okay if I kind of shoehorn this topic into a CTC paper? It's like, oh yeah, that sounds great. So what I originally planned on doing was just writing a paper on works of the law and just kind of looking at the old perspective, the new perspective, and then just kind of doing like a pretty straightforward exegetical study and kind of taking you through the text and sort of the kind of things that everybody always does. And as I was going through that, I had centered on the question of works of the law, because I found that when I was going back and forth between figures like Piper and Wright, so like your old perspective, new perspective folks, it seemed like the biggest divergence between them was on works of the law. They were still sort of in the same ballpark when they were talking about justification. They're still sort of in the same ballpark when they're talking about faith as well. But works of the law, there's just the interpretation, what they thought Paul meant by that was so different. And so I thought, hey, I'll focus on this and kind of work on this. So I was down in the stacks in the library, in the little reference area over there where Calvin's commentary on Romans was. And so I was going through his Romans commentary. And as I was doing that, I got to this section where it goes, and he's at Romans 3:20, and he's what is it? This section. So it talks about being, we reckon that nobody is justified. What is it by? Josh, are you there? I think you've disappeared. Uh-oh. Or is there? Technically, are we okay, Josh?
About that, I am back.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I was talking to myself there.
Sorry for the 10-second hiatus. Not sure what happened, but glad to be back.
Okay, do we have okay audio? I still see a frozen Josh, but I don't know if that's just on my end. Oh, there you go. Excellent.
Great.
Good. Fantastic. So I was looking at Calvin's commentary at Romans 3:20, and he goes and says it's a matter of doubt even amongst the learned what the works of the law mean. I thought, oh, that's a really interesting admission from Calvin. So I went in. He says the addition of the word law induced Jerome, Chrysostom, and Origen to go into talk about, think that he's referring to these specific things of the Mosaic law. And so then he goes and proceeds on to say, hey, this is why they're wrong. And then he goes and he says, I'm aware that Augustine has a different position. And then he goes and he says why he thinks, St. Augustine's position is wrong. And then he kind of proceeds in the next section. I was reading this like, this is very strange. Josh, I don't know if you had a chance to read much Calvin. For Dr. Packer's class, we had large sections of Calvin that we would read. And so I had gotten used to, whenever I was reading Calvin, just to see he would always go and he'd always bring his friends with him. He'd always bring the church fathers whenever there's a disputed question of any kind. And so I was thinking here you have sort of your most disputed of questions and looking at, Paul's theology of justification. Surely he's going to go and he's going to say all the church fathers that are on his side here. And instead, what I found was the opposite. Instead, what he was doing is he was mentioning all these church fathers who had a position that was different from his, which as I was looking at the way he was articulating, I'm like, that sounds kind of like the stuff that N.T. Wright's saying. And then he has Augustine's position, says, well, he kind of gets it wrong too. And then he just sort of kind of goes out on a limb and just giving his own position. And I just stood there in the library and I thought, this is really odd. I can't remember Calvin going and doing this really, really ever on a major, disputed question like this. And so I just thought to myself, gosh, I wonder if you looked in the early church, what they would say about works of the law. And I wonder, how Paul's, earliest readers, and I wonder how they interpreted what he meant here and how that would relate to the, what we're calling the old and new perspectives. Because here you have Calvin, who, in our debates, we're describing him as as an kind of old, the major old perspective guy together with Luther. But when Calvin is looking back at the older interpreters, he's saying, no, these guys have it wrong. So what actually is the real old perspective, and how does all of this go and work? So I want to say this was on a Saturday. And I remember because we were having dinner at Ross Hastings' house that night. And so it was either Friday or Saturday. I forget which one it was. So I asked him when I was there, like, hey, can I change my paper topic and sort of try to say, what did the early church understand by works of the law? And how would that kind of relate to our contemporary debates and everything? So he said, yeah, sure, go for it. So then I spent the next couple of days, because I had to turn the paper in on a Tuesday. So the next couple of days, just frantically in the library, going through everything that I could find from the early church and the interpretation of Paul's letters in these areas. And just what I found was it just astonished me, because these figures, the stuff that they were saying, sounded so much like what I had found in N.T. Wright, who was the charges that I was used to being leveled against him is like, this is theological novelty. Here's this guy with all these new ideas. And so, I mean, a lot of that came from folks like Piper saying, we need to stick with the wisdom of the ages. We can't just, we don't want to, we need to listen to, what the church has traditionally taught on these things. And here I am going back to the, earliest sources. Like, boy, they don't sound like Wright does. So that's kind of how the project got started. And then from a CTC paper, with some encouragement from Hans, actually, it turned into an article, and then article turned into a larger form for a PhD application, which then eventually turned into a PhD, and then a book, and then now the edition of the book that you've got in front of you. So that's a somewhat brief version of how this whole thing got started.
Wow. Thanks, Matt. That's great. And I'll just use the opportunity here to give a mention to all of our viewers. If what Matt is saying is stirring up any questions in you, please feel free to email those in to questions@regent-college.edu. Be them questions of Pauline theology or questions about the writing journey and how that can grow, as we'll continue to explore here with Matt, from a first-year CTC paper to much, much more. So feel free to send those in. Matt, yes, it's neat to hear you talk about N.T. Wright. He's obviously had an impact on you. I've read previously that prior to coming to Regent, you were listening to N.T. Wright's Romans in a Week course on Regent Audio. Now, be it 10 or 15 years later, you've got N.T. Wright's blurb on your book calling it theologically explosive. How cool is that for you to not only get to meet and interact with, one of your heroes, but now to have your work serve his scholarship in a way too.
It feels pretty unreal. I mean, the first thing to say is that it's a really good advertisement for regionaudio.com. I believe that's the URL we have working with. But if you've never had a chance to go through his Romans in a week, the class that he gave, gosh, back in the 90s, I think, that was how I got started in all this. I mean, I didn't start as a theology guy or biblical scholar. I was working in Oakland doing inner city ministry stuff, and I was because I was teaching from scripture for the young people that we're working with. I was always into trying to figure out good resource and just trying to understand the scriptures better for myself, so I could be a good steward of them and teach the kids, hey, how do you go and you apply all this. And so that's how I got started in all of this. Is I was listening to his Romans in a week class, and there's a bit where he's talks about how the word pistis, which means faith, is also the same word as faithfulness. And for me, just that one Greek word is like, wait a second, if that means this, and then some of the paradigms that I've inherited as far as the way that there's kind of this sort of absolute faith works division doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And that dichotomy is so foundational, but also something that I couldn't really make a whole lot of a sense of in some of the traditional ways that have been presented to me. And so I just benefited tremendously. So I just immediately went and I just thought I have to learn Greek. And so I just started, learning Greek on my own. And then eventually I had enough people go who, saw me kind of always carrying Greek textbooks around, always carrying a Greek Bible around. I had enough people kind of go and say, hey, are you going to go to seminary or something like that? Because this isn't like normal behavior to just go and carry to be carrying a Greek textbook around, be reading it for hours and hours on end. And so, it really was. It was from downloading some of these classes that we've had at Regent over the years, and specifically that Romans in a week class that really got me started in thinking, gosh, I really want to understand. I want to understand this stuff better. And so when we were at SBL last year, I had this was just a really surreal experience of meeting up with Wright, and I had a chance to be in contact with him over the past number of years and stuff. But we were talking, and he was thanking me over and over for my book and for the stuff that I wrote, which I didn't know have any way to sort of make sense of that, because just the debt that I have to him and how much of I've benefited from the kinds of stuff that he's done. I just feel so grateful that I have a chance to be able to work in some kind of material that would be of use and be constructive for real biblical scholars like he and people like Doug Moon and other folks who've been involved in this project. And I'm grateful for Regent for giving me an opportunity to go into to kind of develop these things, because it was in the context of being at Regent that I was I think part of it is it being an interdenominational school, it makes it so that you're able to engage with and ask some of the big questions and engage with them from a number of different angles, engage with them from a number of different sort of kind of time periods and things like that. It's, I think, one of the unique strengths of this school, and I think it's part of what influenced me to kind of start looking along the lines of what I did. So,
oh, thanks, Matt. And I can hear your humility, but also your joy in contributing something to the field, and you really have throughout this book. It's a landmark book in Pauline studies. It won Scott McKnight's Jesus Creed Book of the Year, and that was in 2018, I think, right? It might have been 2019. There's a bit of a journey behind the book too. It was originally published as a formal dissertation series, more Seebeck, and now has been made available through IVP Academic in a much more affordable edition, I will add too, maybe a third of the price. But Matt, could you give those who are listening just perhaps like a very brief sort of Cole's Notes version of just a key insight of your research, and what if you could sum up very briefly what's sort of the lasting contribution to the field that your book makes?
Oh boy. I can try that. In some ways, I'm not necessarily, there's probably other people who could go and say it's better than I can, because I think as far as one's own work goes, you don't necessarily always have that kind of perspective to be able to say like, hey, wow, this is the lasting contribution of mine. I can say for, for myself how, how this material has helped me and has how helped to shape my thinking and stuff. But I mean, even you, Josh, I imagine you could probably, if you took a stab at this, you might do better than I would. I think so. If you're thinking kind of big picture, these debates that we're having between old perspective on Paul, new perspective on Paul, which are those terms go back about 40 years to kind of the aftermath of E.P. Sanders' releases Paul and Palestinian Judaism. And he just kind of says, look, the kinds of things that these Luther, Calvin, and then those who are within New Testament studies kind of that are in that traditional sort of Protestant heritage, which primarily in Sanders' own days, is Rudolph Bultmann and those of kind of that more kind of radical, Lutheran school. He just says all the stuff that they're saying about what Paul is reacting against with the Jews. He's like, you just can't find that in Second Temple Judaism. That the Jews they're not sort of individualistically trying to go and to sort of perform enough works to go and to create a ladder up to heaven to sort of earn this kind of heavenly merit. That's not what debates like this are actually over. And so you've kind of had that that Sanders view is called the new perspective, and saying no, that these debates are actually about the Torah and whether or not you have to practice and obey the Torah as a Gentile when you go and you become a Christian, and that practicing the Torah is itself not a kind of a merit-based individualistic thing. When you adopt the Torah, when you adopt this, you're adopting the Jewish way of life. You are you're becoming a Jew, and you're joining the Jewish covenant. So it's a this kind of communal significance. So there's your new perspective, kind of reacting against the old perspective. And what I found, again, just following this hint from Calvin, is that this whole debate that we've been having is just standing on its head. We've been calling this thing the new perspective, which, if you look within the the early centuries of the church, it's itself ubiquitous. It's just everywhere. Now, it doesn't mean that everything about the new perspective is right, because there's a number of areas where new perspective figures are going to differ, and in a lot of the ways that they understand Paul's logic to work. There's a lot that's there that wouldn't necessarily correspond with what the early church is saying as far as how Paul's logic works. But even with that, as far as the subject matter under question and the significance of it, that view on works of the law, that new perspective view, is just all over the place in the early church. And then on the other side, what we've been calling the old perspective over the centuries. Or not over the centuries, hopefully not centuries, over the past few decades, you just don't find it in this period. It's a distinct view relative to the early Christian tradition. And again, it's one of those things where for me, actually, one of the things I really enjoyed in this project is being able to spend a bunch of time reading Luther and Calvin. And it's really interesting how for both of them, you would kind of get this same sense as well, just from their own writings, because for both of them, the earliest interpreter of Paul that they have access to in any kind of considerable size is Origen. And so the earliest perspective on Paul that they know about is Origen. And for the most part, they just completely reject it, and they reject the tradition that goes and follows. And so kind of starting with Origen and going onwards, they just see, gosh, these guys, they didn't really see what Paul says. And so you can see in both of their writings, specifically in this area, how they go and they distinguish their own interpretations from what it is that, the kind of going from the early church onwards, the way they're taught. So that's one thing. That's kind of a sort of an easy, fun, takeaway, that the way that we've conceived of this debate is sort of, it's sort of like we're standing on our heads. And, where part of that just comes from the fact that, we have a separation of disciplines within academic everything. Of course, this isn't just related to theology, but definitely within theology, you've got, even within biblical studies, New Testament scholars tend to not talk to Old Testament scholars. They definitely don't talk to church history or patristic people. They'll occasionally, read a secondary source on something, but and it fragments even more than that. I mean, you get, Pauline scholars. We usually don't really have much time for, kind of Gospels people and stuff like that, just because we're busy reading all kinds of our obscure articles on Paul and stuff like that. And so we don't really get around to seeing kind of broader, big picture stuff, or trying to figure out, hey, how does the stuff that we found, how does that relate back to a broader, big picture? And again, this is a really good plug for Regent, because Regent doesn't allow you to do that. Regent doesn't allow you to sort of sit in a silo and just kind of, take your sort of narrow academic area and say, well, this is all I'm going to really, really care about. I think that the interdisciplinary, nature and focus of what Regent is and what Regent wants to do lends itself to the kinds of projects like this, where you're not just looking at, the text all day and just that by itself, but you have to say, no, how does this actually relate to these other areas? And sometimes it's when you're trying to see sort of the big picture, that you can say, wait a second, we've, like in this particular area, it's like, I think that we've sort of been looking at this whole thing backwards. So again, another plug for the kinds of stuff that, that Regent does, that, engenders a project like this.
Thanks, Matt. That was a great answer. And you definitely hit on what I had in mind there. Just that whole, sort of a theologically explosive idea that the new perspective is actually really old, right? And the old perspective is not as old as we may have thought of. That's just a huge contribution you've made. So thank you. And on the interdisciplinary note, I think of your own work at Regent too. And, you studied in biblical languages. You went on to do a PhD in New Testament. You teach DE in theology, right? So even, in your own mix of work, I won't ask you, but I wonder to myself, how has that continued to help you think in an interdisciplinary way? And I would guess the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. That's all I've got. Yes. No, I think, absolutely. I think, doing, again, this is just going to be telling you all the reasons that you should go to Regent. But the fact that you are forced to go and to do stuff in a number of different disciplines. And, for me, it's like, how is it that I came across this insight into what is, New Testament and, kind of patristics, related. I came across it from a systematic theology class from Dr. Packer, and from him forcing me to read tons of Calvin. And I don't mean like forcing. There's parts that I enjoyed as well, but I was like, he had his the stuff I was doing for him. There's a lot of Calvin that I read there, and it was from that I went and I got the hints for the material that was in patristics and in New Testament studies. And so the answer is yes. Going and doing all these things together and trying to figure out how the various pieces relate to each other is really helpful. And it makes it so that you can end up coming across stuff like this.
That's awesome. Thanks, Matt. We've hit the halfway point of our hour together. Do you think this is a good time to bring the kids in? Matt's
I think so.
Wifely added kids have been very patiently and cooperatively hanging out outside, but we know we've got lots of Matt's friends and family watching, so just appropriate to break up all the heavy theological discussion and enjoy the kids. So
for anyone who doesn't know, Leanne, my wife, and I, we met we met in a Hebrew class at Regent in our first year, and then we got married kind of right at the end in 2013. And so it's another great shout out for Regent. Leanne's, yeah, she's arguably the greatest person in the history of humanity. And there is, Regent tends to draw folks like that, I think. And so if there's like, one major reason why COVID needs to end, it's so that the atrium dating scene can be reinvigorated. Because I imagine, Josh, you're only in a virtual atrium right now, and I imagine that there's probably not a whole lot happening there these days.
I will say, the bookstore is currently the only part of Regent that is open to the public. So there might not be an atrium dating scene, but come on in and browse the bookstore and check out that bookstore dating scene too, or get.
It's definitely possible. We hung out in the bookstore as well. So I think that they're coming over here. Hold on just a second.
While Matt's doing that, I'll just send a reminder to all those folks watching. If you've got any questions for Matt about Pauline theology or the publishing journey, please send those in to questions@regent-college.edu. Hi. Welcome.
So this is Camille, and this is Michael. Can you say hi?
Hey. Hi, Camille and Michael.
And then this is Raphael. You say hi.
Hi.
Hi, Raphael. Did you bring Bowser?
What do you got, buddy?
Bowser.
Yeah. And then this is Leanne over here. And is there anything that you want to say to the audience? I just want to show them all the teeth you're missing.
Walk, walk. I've just given the biggest smile I can give.
Oh, that's very good. That's a very big smile.
Great smile.
Yeah, you're standing on the chair. That's great. Okay, do you want to say bye to the audience?
Bye. I want to say something.
Okay, what do you want to say, buddy? What do you want to say? Oh, good job. That was very good. Okay, do you want to say bye? Okay.
Good job, buddy.
Yeah. If you don't let them come and visit every once in a while, then they'll break down the door. So it's one of those things where it's probably best that you allow them their time. And there's less door repairs that way too, which is good.
There we go. Oh, that was great. Thanks.
Yep.
I think that's a first for our virtual book launches to have some kids show up and so eagerly say hi to folks. That's awesome. Another question for you, Matt. We've encouraged current Regent students to come and listen to this, and some are. I know there's some aspiring authors out there, and I'm wondering if you have any tips. This is sort of bigger picture stuff now, but tips on navigating the world of going about being publishing. I don't know if you set out with that in mind. It's of course happened, and I trust you've learned a few things along the way. So, do you have anything to share?
Yeah. Gosh, that's a great question. I think for me, when I was doing this, I think that the kind of the foundational question is there something that I really need to go and write on? Is there something that I need to go and to do here where this is actually going to, in a sense, kind of fill a gap and actually go and help people in a way that something else isn't, that there isn't something else that goes and does this. For me, when I came across all this early material, I kind of looked all around. I tried to find anything else that was, that was doing that, and looking at the early reception of Paul, and relating that to current debates, and then trying to think, hey, what would this suggest about what Paul meant in these areas? I I couldn't find anything else that was, those really getting into this topic. And the sense that I had was that, I was kind of uniquely placed in having come across all this stuff to be able to go and to kind of research all and just say, hey, this is what these early sources, go and say. So I think the first thing is is there something that you have, conviction of like, this is something that I've been given to do. And this is something that I'm sort of uniquely placed to be able to serve in this way. I think if the answer is yes to that, then by all means go for it. And if there isn't a clear sense of that, yeah, I would say I would say go and hang on. I think for me, even in having the idea and even having kind of be accepted for a to write as a dissertation and everything. I think because still being really tied to the ministry context in Oakland and just having a lot of young people we're very close with, it took a lot I guess you'd say it took a strong amount of conviction for me to devote the few years to moving to a different continent and stuff, to go into to research and write on this, because there is is meaningful ministry work that we're involved with down here. But I did have that sense, I did have that conviction of it. It seemed like I've come across something where going and writing this for this period of time is, from my own understanding, it's going to be helpful, but I think this could really help a lot of other people as well. And so if one has that, if you have that sense of there's something that is unique here, that I've sort of uniquely been given a position to be able to help out and contribute in this area, then absolutely. I think you want it's, I think publishing all that kind of stuff is great, but I think it's important, I think, to have that on the front end, and to be asking yourself that that question, not just to be of the variety of books there's no end. And so to not just sort of kind of join in that, was like, hey, is this something where for myself, when I'm dead and gone, I'm standing before God, where it's like, hey, this is I did what you wanted me to do with the time that you gave me, and I was able to go and to use the gifts that you gave me to go and to do this thing that seemed like it need to be done to serve your kingdom. It's like, that's what you want to go and answer yes to. So if one has something like that, if there's a particular idea, particular area, then sort of the next sort of thing, and really the main thing I would suggest to go and to cultivate is to cultivate perseverance, and to cultivate a willingness to fail, and to fail repeatedly. I don't know if anybody is necessarily born with thick skin. Like, anybody who goes and develops thick skin does so through failure and failure, and continually going and picking yourself off the mat. And even a project like this, which it's been a joy to be able to work on and do over the years, and I still love this material. Even this, there's a number of times of picking yourself off the mat, where the first time that because I had I'd been encouraged to go and apply for the doctorate in Oxford. This is in 2012, and I was shortlisted as a candidate, but it wasn't actually accepted to the program in 2012. It was only the next year in 2013 when it was accepted, and I went whenever they're go and do it. And I remember in 2012, having this whole proposal, having this all this stuff laid out, and then having it not go through. And I just remember standing there in the atrium over, kind of right when you're, about to go into the main chapel room. And I think I was with, I think Tad Inboden, Ryan Kelly, Scott Barber, Barney Asprey. So all like kind of closest friends. I just remember us standing there, and it was like our dog had just gotten run over or something. It was just, we were just all really, really sad. And there was like definitely a, hey, kind of what are you gonna go and do now? And there was definitely a you know, there was a kind of picking yourself up off the mat process, and, you know, just asking God, hey, is this what you want me to do? Is this what you give me? Because if so, then even though this is painful currently, I'm gonna keep going and continue letting, you know, my work be refined, and continue letting myself be refined. And so, you know, having kind of had the affirmative, you know, response on that, it just kept going through. And so, you know, it turned to the dissertation, and that, you know, that worked well. But even there's a lot of difficulties. And, you know, one of my main supervisor went and kind of switched. He left schools when I was over there. So there's a lot of, you know, challenges that are faced there. And then as far as, you know, the publication process, so getting it kind of, you know, published the first time, there's so many ups and downs, and plot twists, and just, you know, having it, you know, accepted for one series, and then suddenly the wheels fall off somehow, and then nothing goes through. And then the second time around with InterVarsity as well, you know, just a lot of, you just, you know, require a lot of perseverance. But I think through that, again, I think the biggest thing is, you know, if there is a core idea that's there, that is, you know, something that's God-given, which is actually, you know, is actually gonna help people and be of service to the church and stuff, then, you know, all of that failure is good for going both for refining your work and making it so that core idea gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and clearer and clearer and clearer, and more you know, precise. And then also just from a character standpoint of, you know, forming you as well. And you know, you know, for myself in my own life, I'm grateful for having to, you know, go through a you know, number of a number of instances where I really did have to sort of, you know, pick myself up off the floor and say, Lord, I trust you with this, and I trust that if this is what you want me to do, there's going to be something good, and you're going to provide a way. So those are probably the two main things I'd say. You know, make sure that there really is something that you've got, that you've uniquely been given to give and to deliver. And sometimes you don't know that until you try, until you just, whether it's writing a paper or anything, write an article. But then once you got that, you know, to allow the Lord to give you perseverance by giving you failure over and over, because it is good. You know, produces a harvest of righteousness, all those good things. But, you know, it's not easy.
Well, thanks very much, Matt. It's great to hear from you sharing so personally about the process too, and the ups and downs. And also, I'm just hearing your heart throughout all of this, you know, being one of service and stewardship, and really, you know, you yourself asking, yeah, Lord, what would you have me do in particular? And that makes me wonder what's next for you as you continue to discern these things. You're back in the California area where you had done that inner city ministry. Is that still on the radar, or do you still feel that ongoing pull in the writing and scholarship direction? Of course, you're actively teaching. What else do we have to look forward to from you?
That's great question. So I mean, this is we thank God for the opportunity to be able to be back here in this area, and to be able to teach this school. I teach scripture in Berkeley at DSPT. It's a great school. It's a great job to be able to have. As far as ministry context, this is for us is fantastic, because I'm basically able to have a job teaching scripture, which goes and pays the bills and things like that. And then just on a day-to-day basis, I'm able to go and we all as a family, we're still able to be connected and engage with everybody that we've been close with over the years. So I mean, so it's great. I just kind of literally like every day there's I get a new call or a new text, or somebody goes and kind of comes through. So it's for me, I'm so grateful to have that as a ministry context, both from my own rootedness, and I just learned so much from being able to just try to figure out how to serve, and and what can be sometimes difficult contexts like that and stuff. So I love that. And it always, for me, it keeps all of this material, really fresh and live and relevant. And so it's not kind of lost in an academic thing, but it's like, how does this actually go and apply in real life? And then often, apply in real life in some pretty tough context. And sometimes when you say like apply in real life, if we're all sort of like, decently well off or kind of, academically oriented people, so like that. The trouble with that is that that's not necessarily real life. That's not the real life that most people lead. And so, to have context like this, to be able to always be relating things back to is I'm just really grateful for that. As far as scholarship stuff, past this, there's a handful of other projects I've been working on. So I've been working for the past few years on something for St. Vladimir's Press for on Clement of Rome. So on first and second Clement. So that the really beautiful series, I've got the popular patristic ones, which I think that you probably have one behind you in your virtual background. But the beautiful series that they've got, I've been working on one of those for past couple of years, which hopefully will be complete pretty soon. Which also, I mean, that whole project just started as a guided study I did with Hans as well. So that was also a larger version of a regent paper. At least that's where it had its seeds. And then I think down the road, as a next project, I'm hoping to do a more popular level, book that looks at the way that salvation functions within the early church, and to say, hey, all of the elements, everything that is related to salvation in Christ, and how Christ goes and saves us and restores us and makes us new. There's so much riches on that within the early centuries of the church that I've come across. And it's just intelligible stuff, but it's often locked up in books that either are themselves look kind of old and dusty and unapproachable, or that's it's stuck with patristic scholars like me who go and use big words to go and make things way more complicated than they should be. So I love to do a book that looks at salvation in the early church like that, and just pulls out some as many of the gems from the early fathers as possible, and to have a book that you could go and give to your grandma and that she could go and profitably read, because I don't think this stuff is unintelligible at a lay level. It's usually our own fault for making stuff more complicated than it needs to be. So
well, those are some great and exciting projects. Look forward to seeing them as they continue to develop. We've got about 10 minutes left here, so it's a great time to start getting to some questions from our audience. The first one that came in from Thomas, he is asking, Matthew, what would you say to the very hypothetical Pauline scholar who doesn't think they need to study the 2nd century reception of Paul in order to really understand Paul?
Oh, that's great. The very hypothetical Pauline scholar. Unfortunately, this very hypothetical scholar that you mentioned, I mean, that kind of, I guess you could say that kind of approach is endemic to the discipline, and really has to be fought against, because that's just sort of your baseline assumption, is that you just go back to Paul, and that's kind of all all you happen to need. I think that I think that the past couple of centuries in scholarship, and the way that Pauline scholarship particularly in a lot of ways kind of ran out of gas at least in some areas in the 20th century, which is similar to kind of certain kind of historical Jesus studies, and kind of the various quests for the historical Jesus. I think what ends up happening a lot of the time is that if you do not have your reading of the text informed by the early reception of that text, and I mean this, you can say it's for reception in general, but I think early reception in particular just has a privileged historical vantage point, in that you're sharing the same kind of cultural assumptions, kind of all the sort of things that are, you know, unspoken within the text and things like that. You're able to catch all of that, and you're just closer. You know, you're closer and have more direct links and ties to those who personally knew these figures and everything. If you don't do that, what ends up happening is that it ends up being very easy to just go and to project our own ideals onto whatever we're reading. And so if you look at Paul in particular, if you separate that earlier reception and say this isn't relevant, first I think that's less than fully historical, because I think that, you know, I think particularly earlier reception is historical data that has to be explained one way or the other, and just kind of doing like a hand waving thing and saying, well, everybody got it wrong, or like, oh, they just got into Greek stuff, and so that's why, you know, just sort of those really you kind of facile like explanations. I don't think that's not real history. That's not you know, real historical work. I think historically, I think that needs to be explained. But also, if you just looking at the text itself and the people that we're talking about, if you're not informed by that early reception, if it's just kind of you and that, then it's so easy to just project your own ideals, your own views, your own values onto Paul. So I mean, the fun one here, which I think most people would agree on, would be Bultmann, and how Bultmann ends up not in every single instance, because there's a lot of places, or at least there's some places where Bultmann will interestingly just go and say, yeah, Paul is just wrong here. So Paul seems like he believed in the bodily resurrection. He was just wrong. And so occasionally Bultmann did, but a lot of times when you go and you see the Paul that Bultmann goes and constructs and saying, no, I'm not going to be constrained by, you know, reception. I'm not going to be even constrained by the rest of the New Testament. It's just me and Paul. Well, what ends up happening is that Paul sounds a lot like a 20th century existentialist. That's just what it comes down to. You end up, you know, getting something that sounds a lot like Heidegger in a lot of places, or a sort of a really unorthodox, you know, Kierkegaard or something like that, which is, of course, you know, is Bultmann himself. That's kind of where his root and his own ideas are. So I think if we are going to avoid projecting our own ideas onto the text, or even to say avoid, that might be too strong of language, because that's something that I think we always need to, whether we're informed by reception or not, we always need to be cognizant of the fact that that's a danger. But a really good way of protecting ourselves against that is to use that historical data of early reception and allow that to inform us. Because I mean, otherwise it's really easy. I mean, the old we use this analogy all the time. If you think of the Little Mermaid with the fork and the dingle hopper, and whether, you know, Scuttle thinks that this is actually the fork is the dingle hopper, and that you use it to go and you know, comb your hair and stuff like that. Just taking the artifact by itself, it's actually not that easy to answer the question, because you can comb your hair with a fork. It works. And if you didn't really know it one way or the other, who knows? Maybe it is called a dingle hopper. It's you could say, in a sense, it's this reception. It's sort of the way that the text is actually used in these contexts. So when Ariel goes and, you know, gets up to land and sees everybody is using these dingle hoppers actually to go and eat food and not to, you know, comb their hair, it's in the context of the way the text is, you know, and here we're talking about a fork, but to use the analogy, the way the text is received, you can say, oh, that's what's going on here. That's what this is actually used for. So I think as a heuristic guide, it's really, really helpful. It keeps us from doing the textual equivalent of combing our hair with forks.
There you go. Thanks, Matt. On to the next question. These ones came in from Amy Wen. Hi, Amy. Amy's a real keener and has about 3 really great questions here. I'm gonna read all 3 of them to you. You obviously can answer them all, and feel free to just ask if you want me to repeat anything. But
Sure.
Amy's asking first, how is your research in the in the patristics and justification trickled into other major theological questions.
Okay.
Also, can you subscribe to Luther or Calvin's theological systems after, quote, reclaiming the old new perspective on justification like you've done?
Yeah.
And 3, how does this bear on your reflections about grace versus free will, eschatology, penance, etc.? A lot there. Yeah.
There's a lot there. I guess so. The first thing I would say is, I would encourage Amy. I think it's really valuable just to go and have a look at the sources themselves, and to read through the sources themselves, and kind of how it, kind of grace, free will, everything along those areas, and the nature of justification, all that stuff. If I'm hopeful that a book like mine can be a helpful sort of introduction to a lot of these things, because in going and looking at works at the law, it looks at kind of all these other things, in the various, just the nexus of issues that's there. And so I hope that just from following the sources that that they're there in the book, they're really easy to go and to pick up on your own, and to go through. And for me, what I've tried to do is I've tried to let myself be a student of these folks. So I just think, hey, these are the people who are closer to Paul than anybody else is. And I trust God's guidance of the Church of the Martyrs and everything like that. And so just in a general sense, I want my reading of Paul to be informed by them. I remember Bruce Heinmarsh had a great line one time where he was just talking about, like, I'm reading the scriptures was authoritative, but I want to invite these people to my Bible study. And I think that, when we're looking at all these early figures, it's like, man, I like having all kinds of people in my Bible study, but if I'm thinking people who have a really uniquely valuable vantage point, these are people that I really, really want at my Bible study. So I'd go and say, hey, go and open them, yourself, and stuff like that. When it comes to Luther and Calvin, specifically, it's been interesting, because there's areas where the longer I spend reading Luther and Calvin, the more areas of distinction I can see between them, and then also just the more interesting their thought is. There really are, if you get into, so for instance, one of the areas that is really distinct in Luther, which for me was really striking, was the way that he sees the attempt to go and obey the law as itself sinful. And not just like kind of sinful. This is the worst sin, because if you're doing that, you're going and you're trying to save yourself, which means you're trying to be God, because only God can save you. So you're not just committing idolatry, you're committing self-idolatry. So the attempt to go and to be justified by works is itself the epitome of sin. It is when Christ was saying that many false messiahs are going to come, he was talking about you if you are the one that's going and doing that. It's you see that it's really interesting, and it's actually it grates against the Reformed tradition in a lot of ways, because Calvin he doesn't see the attempt to go and to do what's good as itself problematic. He just thinks it's impossible. He just thinks because of the human condition, because of human depravity, we just can't get the works to go and to be justified, and so we need someone else's works to go and count in our stead. It's not that the attempt itself is sinful. So for me, I found it really interesting just to rather than saying, hey, are they kind of wholesale right, or they're wholesale wrong, to try to listen to them and just get a really good sense first, and to try to let their distinctive emphases kind of come through. And I think that even in areas where I guess you could say, even areas where I wouldn't subscribe to the distinctive theological emphases that they have, I at least have more appreciation for where they're coming from and why they read the text the way that they do in their own context, by going and just sitting at their feet for long periods of time and just going through lots and lots of readings of them. So anyway, I hope that some of that engages some of what you've got there.
Thanks, Matt. You managed to catch a lot of it there. And that brings us to the 1 hour mark. So it's time to wrap things up. But Matt, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you. And thank you so much, viewers, for joining us too for this hour. We hope this was enjoyable and beneficial time to you. Final chance.
These can be signed. I have 20 of them that Josh sent. So the first 20 who go and purchase a book through the Regent Bookstore will get one of these. After this, I will have to use Post-it notes to go and to write notes if there are more than 20. So if you want one of these nice things, make sure you are among the first 20.
Yeah, please feel free to call or email the bookstore. We'd be happy to help you. And we also have a direct fulfillment website too that works well, especially for folks in the States. You can purchase from the link in the description on the YouTube video. And if you do that, please just send us a note and we'll get you one of those book plates as well. Just email to the bookstore. But otherwise, thank you folks and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Josh.